What drives a sailor to face the endless deep, knowing one wrong move means vanishing forever beneath the waves? The sea hides more than monsters. It hides men's stories and silence. These films captured that silence better than any textbook could. They told the truth about courage, fear, and the crushing pressure of steel underwater. These are 15 submarine and air-sea war films sailors still swear by. Number 15. The Enemy Below, 1957. The Enemy Below was not just a war film. It was a duel between minds locked beneath and above the same ocean. The movie dared to humanize both sides, showing an American destroyer captain hunting a German U-boat commander. Each man respected the other's skill more than their own survival. That realism earned the film quiet reverence among veterans who knew real battles were fought with patience, not fury. The film's tension built like sonar pings in the dark. It was not loud, it was calculating. The ocean became a chessboard where every sound meant death. Robert Mitchum's performance as Captain Merle carried the weary calm of a man who had seen too much. Opposite him, Kurt Jürgens embodied the stoic dignity of an enemy who no longer believed in victory. Behind the camera, director Dick Powell used authentic naval procedures, filming aboard real ships with military advisors who insisted every tactic ring true. The U.S. Navy supported the production, yet hesitated when the script portrayed both sides with equal honor. Some thought it too sympathetic to Germans, but sailors who served during the war admired that honesty. They knew the enemy was human too. The Enemy Below won an Oscar for special effects, but its true legacy was emotional accuracy. It did not glorify the sea. It respected it. The final salute between the two captains became an image every sailor understood. In the end, respect was the only victory worth claiming beneath the endless horizon. Number 14. Run, Silent, Run Deep, 1958. Run, Silent, Run Deep was born from the depths of obsession. Based on the novel by Commander Edward Beach, it offered one of Hollywood's most authentic submarine dramas. Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster brought volcanic energy to the screen, portraying a clash of authority inside a claustrophobic metal tube where leadership meant life or death. The plot followed a commander consumed by vengeance against a Japanese destroyer that had sunk his former sub. He breaks every rule to pursue the enemy across the Pacific, dragging his crew into suicidal depths. Beneath the surface of war, it became a story of pride madness and the thin line between command and obsession. The Navy supported the film initially but pulled back after reviewing the final cut. Officials believed it showed officers disobeying orders and jeopardizing missions. Some theaters near naval bases even faced quiet protests from veterans groups who claimed the film betrayed the Navy's discipline. But younger sailors whispered that it felt real. They had seen ego threaten survival before. Behind the scenes, Gable and Lancaster fought just as fiercely as their characters. Their rivalry over screen control became legendary, yet that tension added fire to the performances. Lancaster's defiance mirrored his character's rebellion. Gable's fading authority echoed the last breath of old Hollywood command. Run, Silent. Run Deep remains revered for capturing the eerie silence of the deep. Its title became part of naval slang and its message endures. In war, it is not the enemy that breaks you, it is pride. Number 13. The Cruel Sea, 1953. The Cruel Sea was the film that made British sailors weep. It was not glamorous, it was gray. It told of convoy duty in the North Atlantic where submarines stalked merchant ships and the ocean itself was the greatest killer. Jack Hawkins as Captain Erickson gave one of the most human portrayals of command in film history. He was steady, broken, and quietly heroic. The film refused Hollywood's gloss. It showed salt corrosion, exhaustion, and moral paralysis. In one haunting scene, Erickson orders depth charges dropped knowing they will kill his own men who had fallen into the sea. The moment still chills naval veterans who know command sometimes means murder by necessity. Censors in Britain worried it was too bleak for a post-war audience still rebuilding its pride. Studios feared audiences wanted victory stories, not tragedies. But The Cruel Sea became a cultural monument precisely because it showed what real sailors faced. Critics called it Britain's first honest naval epic. Director Charles Friend shot aboard real corvettes in raging seas. The cast suffered seasickness, cold, and terror. The authenticity bled through every frame. The Royal Navy initially resisted lending ships, fearing the film's realism would harm recruitment. When they finally relented, even admirals admitted it captured truth no recruitment poster ever could. The cruel sea's legacy stretched far beyond cinemas. It inspired a generation of sailors and writers to confront the moral cost of survival. It reminded the world that the ocean never takes sides. It only takes lives. Number 12. Das Boot, 1981. Das Boot was not a film, it was an ordeal. German director Wolfgang Petersen dragged his cast and crew into the suffocating hell of U-boat warfare and made audiences feel every breath of it. The film followed a submarine crew as they hunted in the Atlantic, but soon became the hunted themselves. What began as duty descended into despair. The set was a full-scale U-boat replica built to crush the human spirit. Actors filmed in real time through narrow corridors where walls dripped with condensation. The camera moved like a trapped ghost, and every creak of metal echoed death. Veterans of the German Navy wept when they saw it. For the first time, cinema had captured their nightmare, not as propaganda, but as punishment. In Germany, the film sparked debate. Some accused Petersen of glorifying Nazi soldiers. Others praised him for showing how war devoured everyone regardless of uniform. The director defended his vision, saying it was about fear not flags. Internationally, it stunned critics who had never seen a war film so intimate, so mechanical, and yet so human. Behind the scenes, the production nearly collapsed. Actors fainted in the heat of the submarine mock-up. The pressure of filming under tight conditions mirrored the claustrophobia of their characters. Yet Petersen refused to compromise. The sound design became legendary, every sonar ping like a heartbeat, every depth charge like a soul cracking. Das Boot remains the gold standard of submarine cinema. It taught filmmakers that the ocean's terror lies not in explosions, but in silence. It taught sailors that truth sometimes sinks slower than steel. Number 11. The Hunt for Red October, 1990. The Hunt for Red October surfaced like a Cold War ghost at the dawn of a new era. Based on Tom Clancy's bestseller, it turned submarine warfare into high-stakes chess. Sean Connery played Captain Ramius, a Soviet commander who decides to defect with the most advanced nuclear submarine in history. His enemies think he is attacking. His allies do not believe him. The film became a global sensation, and for good reason. It arrived just as the Cold War was ending, and audiences were both terrified and fascinated by what lay beneath the ice. Director John McTiernan built suspense through sonar screens and whispered tension, not explosions. The movie showed that in modern war, power is quiet. Behind the scenes, the U.S. Navy cooperated but cautiously. Some officials feared it revealed too much about real submarine procedures. When the Pentagon saw the final cut, they called it too close to classified truth. McTiernan admitted he had received anonymous notes during production offering technical advice. He never confirmed their source. Connery's calm authority carried the film. His performance turned a Soviet captain into a tragic hero haunted by conscience. The visual design of the Red October's interior set new standards for authenticity. Even sailors who served on nuclear submarines later said it felt eerily real. The Hunt for Red October won an Oscar for sound design, but its cultural impact ran deeper. It showed that the Cold War was fought in whispers, not gunfire. It left audiences wondering how many real defections were buried under the Arctic ice. Number 10. The Bedford Incident, 1965. The Bedford Incident was a film about obsession disguised as strategy. It followed a U.S. Navy destroyer captain who hunted a Soviet submarine with religious zeal. Sidney Poitier played a journalist aboard the ship witnessing the descent of logic into lunacy. The film mirrored the Cuban Missile Crisis paranoia that still haunted the world. The story built like a nightmare. The captain, played by Richard Widmark, refused to relax his crew, forcing constant readiness. Every sonar contact became a potential war. The tension snapped when one nervous officer accidentally triggered a nuclear missile launch sequence. The final explosion erased the line between hunter and hunted. Critics called it a warning shot against nuclear madness. The Navy quietly distanced itself, claiming the story exaggerated command behavior. But sailors recognized something terrifyingly familiar in Widmark's performance. They had seen men break under pressure just like that. Behind the scenes, director James B. Harris kept his cast isolated during filming. They lived aboard the ship and followed strict naval routines to build psychological fatigue. Poitier later said it was one of the most exhausting shoots of his career. The result was authenticity born from discomfort. The Bedford Incident did not win awards. It won silence. Many theaters pulled it after nervous audiences left mid-screening. It struck too close to the truth of Cold War tension, yet decades later naval historians would call it prophetic. It predicted exactly how close the world came to nuclear disaster more times than anyone dared admit. The ocean in the Bedford Incident was not blue. It was gray like the morality of men who confuse vigilance with vengeance. Number 9. The Silent Enemy, 1958. The Silent Enemy was the film that dared to make war look like work. Not glory, not chaos, just cold underwater labor. It told the story of British Navy frogman Lionel Crabb, a real diver who vanished during a secret Cold War mission. The film followed his earlier wartime heroics in Gibraltar, where he fought Italian divers who mined Allied ships. Every battle happened beneath the surface in eerie slow motion. Unlike most war epics, The Silent Enemy refused to shout. Its power lay in silence. The underwater sequences were breathtakingly real shot with experimental cameras that had to be hand-built for the production. Director William Fairchild pushed for realism, even hiring former Royal Navy divers to train the cast. Lawrence Harvey played Crabb with brooding intensity. Behind the scenes, he nearly drowned several times. Safety divers had to pull him up when his oxygen line tangled during a night shoot. British newspapers praised the realism, but others questioned the timing. The real Lionel Crabb had mysteriously disappeared only 2 years earlier during a covert dive near a Soviet warship. The British government refused to comment. Some officials reportedly tried to block the film's release, claiming it risked revealing naval secrets. Fairchild denied any connection, but the timing was uncanny. That silence made the movie more haunting than any script could have planned. The Silent Enemy remains one of the most atmospheric underwater war films ever made. It blurred the line between heroism and secrecy. In the end, it asked one question every diver understands. What do you give up when the sea keeps its secrets? Longer than any nation ever could. Number 8. Below, 2002. Below was not a typical war film. It was a ghost story set inside a World War II submarine. Director David Toko-Ri turned historical realism into psychological horror, blending supernatural dread with the paranoia of depth and darkness. Sailors who watched it said it captured the feeling of being trapped underwater with fear breathing down your neck. The plot followed the crew of an American submarine that rescues survivors from a torpedoed hospital ship only to find something sinister aboard. Strange sounds echo through the hull. Instruments malfunction. Men vanish. The ocean itself seems alive. What begins as a rescue turns into a descent into madness. The Navy refused to endorse the film, calling it disrespectful to history. Too High insisted it was not about haunting, but guilt. The submarine becomes a metaphor for secrets no one can escape. The filmmakers built full-scale interiors that rocked and tilted on hydraulic rigs to mimic the claustrophobia of underwater combat. Bruce Greenwood delivered a chilling performance as the commanding officer hiding a dark truth. Critics were divided. Some saw a failed horror experiment. Others called it a masterpiece of atmosphere. Veterans who served aboard subs during the war praised its sound design. They said it captured the groaning pressure of steel and the way fear travels faster than sound underwater. Below vanished quickly from theaters, but resurfaced years later as a cult classic. It stands as the only submarine film where terror comes not from the enemy, but from conscience. For sailors who know that silence can scream louder than sirens, Below hit too close to home. Number 7. The Sea Chase, 1955. The Sea Chase turned the ocean into a moral battlefield. John Wayne starred as a German sea captain trying to escape Allied pursuit at the start of World War II. It was a risky role for Wayne, who was famous for playing American heroes, but he brought rugged conviction to the part, portraying a man torn between duty and decency. The story followed the freighter Ergenstrasse as it fled from Australia to Germany, dodging Allied warships across storm-tossed seas. Along the way, the captain rescues an anti-Nazi spy played by Lana Turner, setting up a tense relationship built on distrust and survival. The ocean itself became the film's third character, vast, unpredictable, and merciless. The U.S. Navy refused cooperation because the protagonist was German. Some critics called it unpatriotic. Others praised its courage for showing a human face on the enemy. The controversy nearly sank the film before release, yet Wayne defended it, saying it was not about sides, it was about sailors trying to live through madness. Behind the scenes, storms nearly destroyed the production. The crew filmed real sea chases in treacherous conditions off Hawaii. Several actors were injured when waves smashed equipment. Wayne insisted on performing his own stunts and nearly drowned during a lifeboat scene. When it premiered, the sea chase received mixed reviews, but among sailors it gained respect. They understood that the sea itself was the true adversary. It was not about politics or ideology. It was about men and women fighting against waves that did not care who they were. The sea chase remains a reminder that even in war, decency can survive if courage does. Number 6. The Damned United, 1952. The Damned United was one of Britain's earliest submarine thrillers that balanced human conflict with mechanical precision. It told the story of a Royal Navy crew trapped under relentless depth-charge attack while their commanding officer slowly unraveled under pressure. Though less famous today, it was one of the first films to show submariners as prisoners of their own steel. The film was shot in tight spaces long before digital effects. The director used claustrophobic camera angles and dim red lighting to mimic the flickering emergency lamps used inside real submarines. The result was unnerving. Viewers could feel the air thinning as tension grew. Real sailors later said it was the first movie that made them smell diesel in the theater. Controversy followed its release. Some naval officers accused the filmmakers of showing insubordination and hysteria within the ranks. The Ministry of Defense even requested that the studio remove scenes depicting breakdowns during combat. The studio refused, claiming the film was meant to show the psychological truth of war, not propaganda. Behind the scenes, the production nearly sank literally. The studio built a submarine set in a flooded tank that leaked constantly. Actors stood knee-deep in freezing water for hours while electrical cables sparked around them. It was dangerous. But that danger gave authenticity. When one of the sets finally collapsed halfway through filming, the footage was used in the final cut to show the sub taking damage. The Damned United was quietly buried by studios after modest box office returns, but sailors kept talking about it. For them, it was not entertainment, it was recognition. The film proved that even the bravest men have breaking points when the ocean closes in. Number 5. The Admiral, 1946. The Admiral emerged in the aftermath of World War II as one of the most daring films ever produced in Japan. It told the story of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the naval commander who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor but secretly opposed the war. The film portrayed him not as a monster but as a tragic patriot who foresaw Japan's defeat yet obeyed duty to the end. Japanese censors were uneasy. Allied occupation forces watched every frame for signs of militarism. To avoid being banned, the director focused on the Admiral's humanity rather than his ideology. Still, many scenes, including his death sequence, were heavily edited. Rumor spread that American authorities ordered reels destroyed. Decades later, some missing footage was found in a private collection revealing how bold the original cut truly was. The production itself was a feat. Real warships were used. Veterans of the Imperial Navy served as consultants. The film crew operated under tight supervision from Allied officers who demanded changes daily. The director endured immense stress, balancing truth and censorship. Despite all obstacles, The Admiral became a quiet triumph. It was the first Japanese war film to depict both pride and guilt in equal measure. Older sailors revered it for showing the spiritual weight of command. Younger audiences were shocked to see their nation's recent history told with sorrow instead of propaganda. Over time, the Admiral became more than a movie. It became an act of national reflection. It proved that sometimes the most powerful films about war are made not in victory, but in regret. Number 4. The Last Command. 1955. The Last Command sailed straight into moral storm waters. It told the story of a submarine captain court-martialed for disobeying orders during wartime to save his crew. At its heart, it asked a timeless question. When does duty end and conscience begin? Sterling Hayden played the captain with raw conviction. The story mirrored his own life as a real veteran of World War II. That connection gave every line weight. His character defied a suicidal order from command and chose humanity over blind obedience. In doing so, he lost his career but saved his men. The U.S. Navy initially supported the production but pulled its cooperation when they read the script. Officials feared it would encourage dissent within the ranks. The filmmakers responded by doubling down on realism. They recreated submarines from decommissioned vessels and shot underwater sequences using experimental lighting rigs. Behind the scenes, Hayden's intensity intimidated the cast. Crew members described him as unpredictable, shifting between calm professionalism and volcanic outbursts. The stress of filming underwater scenes pushed him to the edge, but that pressure became part of the performance. The Last Command divided audiences. Some critics saw it as unpatriotic. Others hailed it as one of the bravest anti-establishment war films of its decade. Sailors admired its courage to confront authority with truth. The film's ending still resonates. A captain stripped of his rank walks alone down a pier while his former crew salutes in silence. No music, no dialogue, only waves. The message lingers. In the depths of war, the hardest battles are not fought with torpedoes but with conscience. Number 3. The Abyss. 1989. The Abyss was not just another underwater movie, it was a deep dive into the soul of fear and faith. Directed by James Cameron before he became king of the ocean with Titanic, it told of American divers who discover something unearthly at the bottom of the Cayman Trough during a Cold War standoff. The ocean in this film was not blue. It was alive and watching. The film's production became legend. Cameron built the largest underwater set ever created, flooding an abandoned nuclear power plant to simulate the abyss. Actors lived submerged for weeks, breathing pressurized air in custom suits. Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio nearly quit when exhaustion and panic set in. The crew nicknamed it The Abuse. Military consultants walked off the set after Cameron refused to romanticize naval behavior. He wanted chaos fatigue and emotional collapse. The Navy was not pleased. Scenes depicting mutiny and paranoia mirrored too many real incidents buried in classified files. Cameron was nearly blacklisted from government cooperation after release. When the movie premiered, critics were divided. Some praised its ambition, others mocked its spiritual ending. But among sailors and divers, the film became sacred. They said it understood the weight of pressure, the sound of loneliness, and the way light dies slowly under miles of black water. The Abyss remains one of the few films that shows the ocean as a sentient force, not an enemy, but a mirror. What you bring below is what destroys you. That lesson every sailor already knew. Number 2. The Bridges at Toko-Ri. 1954. The Bridges at Toko-Ri asked one quiet, devastating question. Where do we find such men? It told the story of American naval aviators during the Korean War flying suicide missions from carriers into frozen death traps. William Holden played pilot Harry Brubaker, a lawyer-turned-reluctant warrior haunted by homesickness and duty. The film looked heroic, but its heart was broken. It showed pilots living on borrowed time surrounded by ice and politics. Every mission across enemy skies felt like a confession. When Brubaker's jet went down and rescue crews faced the impossible choice between saving him or saving themselves, the ocean once again became the judge. Behind the scenes, the U.S. Navy provided full cooperation but grew uncomfortable when they saw the final cut. The ending offered no glory, no triumph, just sacrifice. Admirals reportedly asked producers to reshoot it with a more patriotic tone. The studio refused. Author James Michener, whose novel inspired the film, insisted on realism. He had seen those pilots die. The aerial combat sequences were revolutionary, using real F-9F Panthers filmed aboard the USS Oriskany. Veterans praised the accuracy of carrier operations. Sailors and pilots still show it in training halls for its depiction of courage without reward. The bridges at Toko-Ri became an emotional compass for generations of servicemen. It was not about winning wars. It was about surviving conscience. The final line, spoken by Admiral Tarrant, echoed through the decades. Where do we find such men? Every sailor who ever looked into the sea already knew the answer. Number 1. Crimson Tide, 1995. Crimson Tide was the film that turned nuclear war into a shouting match in a steel coffin. Directed by Tony Scott, it pitted two philosophies against each other in the depths of the Pacific. Gene Hackman played Captain Ramsey, a man of old-school discipline. Denzel Washington played Lieutenant Hunter, the voice of modern conscience. One believed in obedience. The other believed in reason. The story unfolded aboard the USS Alabama during a crisis in Russia when communication cuts left the crew uncertain whether to launch nuclear missiles. The tension was unbearable. Every corridor dripped with sweat, every order echoed like thunder in a tomb. The Pentagon cooperated at first, then backed away after reading the script. They called it insubordination fiction. The Navy feared it might reveal internal command vulnerabilities. Tony Scott used that rejection to his advantage. He leaned into the chaos. The lighting was harsh, the atmosphere choking. The film looked like sweat and steel had fused together. Behind the scenes, the actors immersed themselves in submarine life. Hackman stayed in character even off camera, barking real orders. Washington studied naval protocols for weeks and rewrote scenes to make them truer. Their verbal duels became cinematic legend. The crew described filming as psychological warfare. Critics called Crimson Tide the most intense submarine film since Das Boot. Real officers admitted it reflected genuine fears about command decisions and nuclear authority. The film's legacy endures not for its action, but for its question. What happens when duty collides with doubt and both are right? Crimson Tide proved that true war stories are not about torpedoes, but about the silence before pressing the button. The ocean remembers what men forget. These 15 films captured its power, its terror, and its strange beauty better than any history book ever could. Each story came from silence, pressure, and truth. Which one stayed with you the longest? Tell us below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and surface for the next deep dive into cinematic history.